Here, chapter number 43 and chapter number 44 are merged together. Baba's passing away, which is continued. So, first point of this chapter is preparations. Second, Samadhi Mandir. Third, breaking of the brick. Fourth, 72 hours Samadhi. Fifth, Jog Sannyas. Sixth, Baba's nectar-like words. Chapter 43 and 44 continue the story of Baba passing away, and therefore they are taken together. So let's see the first point, that is previous preparations. It is the general practice amongst the Hindus that when a man is about to die, some good religious scriptures is read out to him with the object that his mind should be withdrawn from worldly things and fixed in spiritual matters, so that his future progress should be natural and easy. Everybody knows that when King Parikshit was cursed by the son of a Brahmin rishi and was to die after a week, the great sage Sukadev expounded to him the famous Bhagavad Puran in that week. This practice is followed even now, and the Gita, Bhagavad and other sacred books are read out to dying persons. Baba, being an incarnation of God, needed no such help, but just to set an example to the people, he followed this practice. When he knew that he was to pass away soon, he asked one Mr. Vaze to read Ram Vijay to him. Mr. Vaze read the book once in the week. Then Baba asked him to read the same again day and night, and he finished the second reading in 3 days. Thus 11 days passed. Then again he read for 3 days and was exhausted. So Baba let him go and kept himself quiet. He abided in his self and was waiting for the last moment. 2 or 3 days earlier, Baba had stopped his morning peregrinations, that is going out and begging rounds, and sat quietly in the masjid. He was conscious till the last and was advising the devotees not to lose heart. He let nobody know the exact time of his departure. Kakasaheb Dikshit and Shriman Bhutti were dining daily with him in the masjid. That day, that is 15th October, after the Aarti, he asked them to go to their residence for dining. Still a few, that is Lakshmibai Shinde, Bhagoji Shinde, Bayaji, Lakshman Bala Shimpi and Nanasaheb Nimunkar remained there. Shama was sitting down on the steps. After giving ₹9 to Lakshmibai Shinde, Baba said that he did not feel well there and that he should be taken to the Dagdiwada of Bhutti, where he would be all right. While saying these last words, he leaned on Bayaji's body and breathed his last. Bhagoji noticed that his breathing has stopped, and he immediately told this to Nanasaheb Nimunkar, who was sitting near. Nanasaheb brought some water and poured it in Baba's mouth. It came out. Then he cried out loudly, "Oh Deva!" Be seemed to open his eyes and say, "Ah," in a low tone. But it soon became evident that Baba had left his mortal body for good. The news of Baba's passing away spread like a wildfire in the village of Shirdi, and all people, men, women and children ran to the masjid and began to mourn his loss in various ways. Some cried out loudly, some wallowed on, and some fell down senseless in the streets. Tears ran down from the eyes of all, and everyone was filled with sorrow. Some people started remembering the words of Sai Baba. Somebody said that Maharaj, that is Sai Baba, told his devotees that in time to come he would appear as a lad of 8 years. In the Krishna avatar, Chakrapani, that is Lord Vishnu, performed this very deed. Krishna appeared before Devaki in the prison as a lad of 8 years, who had bright complexion and who wielded weapon in his forearms. In that incarnation, he lightened the burden of the earth. This incarnation was for the uplift of the devotees. Then, where is the reason for doubt? The ways of the saints are really inscrutable. This contact of Sai Baba with his devotee is not only for one generation, but it is there for the last 72 generations. Generating such ties of love, it appears that Maharaj, that is Sai Baba, has gone for tour, and the devotees had a firm belief that he will return soon. Then the question arose, how to lay Baba's body to rest. Some Mohammedans said that the body should be interred in an open space and a tomb built over it. Even Kushal Chand and Amir Shakkar shared this opinion, but Ramchandra Patil, the village officer, said to the villagers with a firm and determined voice, "Your thought is not acceptable to us. Baba's body should be placed nowhere except in the Wada." Thus, people were divided on this point, and discussion regarding this went on for 36 hours. On Wednesday morning, Baba appeared to Lakshman Mama Joshi in his dream and drawing him by his hand said, "Get up soon. Bapu Sahib thinks that I am dead and so he won't come. You do the worship and the Kakad Aarti." Lakshman Mama was the village astrologer and the maternal uncle of Shama. He was an orthodox Brahmin and daily worshipped Baba first in the morning and then all the village deities. He had full faith in Baba. After the vision, he came with all the puja materials and, do not minding the prostrates of the Maulvis, did the puja and the Kakad Aarti with all due formalities and went away. Then, at noon, Bapu Sahib Chok came with all others and went through the noon Aarti ceremony as usual. After paying due respect to Baba's words, the people decided to place his body in the Wada and started digging the central portion there. In the evening of Tuesday, the sub-inspector came from Rahata and other turned up from the places and they all agreed to the proposal. Next morning, Amir Bhai came from Mumbai and the Mamlatdar from Kopargaon. The people seemed divided in their opinion. Some insisted on interring his body in the open field. The Mamlatdar therefore took a general plebiscite and found that the proposal to use the Wada secured double the number of votes. He, however, wanted to refer the matter to the collector and Kakasaheb Dikshit got himself ready to go to Ahmednagar. Meanwhile, by Baba's inspiration, there was a change in the opinion of the other people and all unanimously voted for the proposal. On Wednesday evening, Baba's body was taken in the procession and brought to the Wada and was interred there with due formalities in the Garbha, that is, the central portion reserved for Murlidhar. In fact, Baba became the Murlidhar and the Wada became a temple and a holy shrine where so many devotees since then have been going to find rest and peace. All the obsequies of Baba were duly performed by Balasaheb Bhate and Upasni, a great devotee of Baba. It may be noted here that, as observed by Professor Narke, Baba's body did not get stiff, though it was exposed for 36 hours, and that all the limbs were elastic, and that his kafni could be taken out without being torn to pieces. And now next story of this chapter is breaking of the bricks. Some days before Baba's departure, there occurred an ominous sign forbidding the event. There was in the masjid an old brick on which Baba rested his hand and sat. At night time, he leaned against it and had his asan. This went on for many years. One day during Baba's absence, a boy who was sweeping the floor took it up in his hand and unfortunately it slipped and fell down and got broken into two pieces. When Baba came to know about this, he bemoaned its loss, saying, "It is not the brick but my fate that has been broken into pieces. It was my lifelong companion. With it I always meditate on the self. It was as dear to me as my life. It has left me today." Some many raise here a question, why should Baba express this sorrow for such an inanimate thing as a brick? To this, Hemadpant replies that since incarnate in this world with the express mission of saving the poor helpless people, and when they embody themselves and act with the people, they act like them. That is, outwardly they laugh, play and cry like all others people, but inwardly they are wide awake to their duties and mission. Next story is about 72 hours Samadhi. 32 years before this, that is in 1886, Baba made an attempt to cross the borderline. On a Margashirsha Purnima, that is full moon day, Baba suffered from a severe attack of asthma. To get rid of it, Baba decided to take his pran high up and go into Samadhi. He said to Bhagat Malsapati, "Protect my body for 3 days. If I return, it will be all right. If I do not, bury my body in that open land," that is pointing to it, "and fix 2 flags there as a mark." After saying this, Baba fell down At about 10 pm, his breathing stopped as well as his pulse. It seemed as if his pran left the body. All the people, including the villagers, came there and wanted to hold an inquest and bury the body in the place pointed by Baba. But Mahalsapati prevented this. With Baba's body on his lap, he sat full 3 days guarding it. After 3 days passed, Baba showed signs of life at 3 am. His breathing commenced, the abdomen began to move, his eyes opened, and stretching his limbs, Baba returned to consciousness, that is, life again. From this and other accounts, let the reader consider whether Sai Baba was the 3.5 cubit body that he occupied for some years and that he led thereafter, or he was the self inside. The body, composed of 5 elements, is perishable and transient, but the self within is the thing, absolute reality which is immortal and intransient. This pure being, consciousness or Brahma, the ruler and controller of the sense and mind, is Sai. This pervades all things in the universe and there is no space without it. For fulfilling his mission, he assumed the body, and after it was fulfilled, he threw away the body and assumed his infinite aspect. Sai ever lives, as also the previous incarnation of God Dattatreya, Sri Narasimha Saraswati of Gangapur. His passing away is only an outward aspect, but in reality he pervades all animate and inanimate things and is their inner controller and ruler. This can be and is even now experienced by many who surrender themselves completely to him and worship him with wholehearted devotion. Though it is not possible for us to see Baba's form now onwards, but if we go to Shirdi, we shall find his beautiful lifelike portrait adorning the masjid. This has been drawn by Shamrao Jaikar, a famous artist and well-known devotee of Baba. To an imaginative and devout spectator, his portrait can give even today the satisfaction of taking Baba's darshan. Though Baba has no gross body now, he lives there and everywhere and will effect the welfare of the devotees even now, as he was doing before, when he was embodied. Saints like Baba never die. Though they look like men, they are in reality God himself. So next move towards the next story, that is Bapu Sahib Jog's Sannyas. Hemadpan closes this chapter with the account of Jog's sannyas. Sakharam Hari alias म्हणजेच उर्फ बापूसाहेब जोग was the uncle of the famous Warkari Vishnubhava Jog of Pune. He had no issue. After his retirement from government service in 1909, he came and lived in Shirdi with his wife. Both husband and wife loved Baba and spent all their time in worshipping and servicing Baba. After Megha's death, Bapu Sahib daily did the Aarti ceremony in the masjid and the Chaudi till Baba's Mahasamadhi. He was also entrusted with the work of reading and explaining Jnaneshwari and Eknathi Bhagwat in Sateswada to the audience. After serving for many years, Jog asked Baba, "I have served you so long, my mind is not yet calm and composed. How is that my contact with saint has not improved me? When will you bless me?" Hearing the Bhakta's prayer, Baba replied, "In due time your bad actions, that is, their fruit or result, will be destroyed, your merits and demerits will be reduced to ashes, and I shall consider you blessed when you will renounce all attachments, conquer lust and sense of taste, and getting rid of all epidemics, serve God wholeheartedly and resort to the begging bowl, that is, accept sannyas." After some time, Baba's words came true. His wife predeceased him, and as he had no other attachment, he became free and accepted sannyas before his death and realized the goal of his life. And now let's see Baba's nectar-like words. The kind and merciful Sai Baba said many times the following sweet words in the masjid. "He who loves me most always sees me. The whole world is desolate to him without me. He who tells no stories but mine, he ceaselessly meditates upon me and always chants my name. I feel indebted to him who surrenders himself completely to me and ever remembers me. I shall repay his debt, that is karza, by giving him salvation, that is self-realization. I am dependent on him who thinks and hungers after me and who does not eat anything without first offering it to me. He who thus comes to me, become one with me, just as a river gets to the sea and becomes merged with it. So, living out pride and egoism, and with no trace of them, you should surrender yourself to me, who is seated in your heart. And the last point of this chapter is, who is me? Sai Baba expounded many times who this me or I is. He said, you need not to go far in search of me. Bearing your name and form, there exists in you as well as in all beings a sense of being or consciousness of existence. That is myself. Knowing this, you see me inside yourself as well as in all beings. If you practice this, you will realize all pervasiveness and thus attain oneness with me. Hemadpan therefore requests the readers humbly and lovingly that they should love and respect all gods, saints, and devotees. Has not Baba often said, he who carps and cavils at others pierces me in the hearts and injures me, but he that suffers and endures pleases me the most. Baba thus pervades all beings and creatures. He likes nothing but love to all beings. Such nectar, pure, auspicious, ambrosia always flowed from Baba's lips. He therefore concludes, those who lovingly sing Baba's fame and those who hear the same with devotion both become one with Sai. And by this way, we are done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. In the last chapter, that is chapter number 43 and 44, which were merged together, you listened heart-touching story of Baba's passing away. Now let's move forward and let's see the chapter number 45, in which stories are described about first, Kaka Sahib's doubt and Anandrao's vision, second, wooden plank, third, Baba's bedstead and not Bhagat's. So preliminary. We have described in the last 3 chapters Baba's passing away. His physical or finite form has no doubt disappeared from our view, but the infinite or spiritual form ever lives. The Leelas which occurred during his lifetime has been dwelt upon at great length up till now. Ever since his passing away, more Leelas have taken place and are even now happening. This clearly shows that Baba is ever living and helping his devotees as before. The people who got the contact of Baba when he was living were indeed very fortunate, but if any of them did not get a dispassion for the thing and enjoyments of the world and had not their mind turned to the Lord, it was their sheer ill luck. What was then desired and is still desired is the wholehearted devotion to Baba. All our senses, organs and mind should cooperate in worshipping and servicing Baba. It is no use in engaging some organs in the worship and deflecting others. If a thing like worship or meditation is to be done, it ought to be done with all our mind and soul. The love that a chaste woman bears to her husband is sometimes compared to that which a disciple bears to his master, that is Guru. Yet the former falls far short for the latter, which is incomparable. No one, whether he be father, mother, brother or any other relation, comes to our aid in attaining the goal of life, that is self-realization. We have to chalk out and traverse the path of self-realization ourselves. We have to discriminate between the unreal and real, renounce the thing and enjoyments of this world and the next, and control our senses and mind and aspire for liberation only. Instead of depending upon others, we should have full faith in ourselves. When we begin to practice discrimination, we come to know that the world is transient and unreal, and our passion for worldly things becomes less, and ultimately we get dispassion or non-attachment for them. When we know that Brahma, which is no other than our Guru, is the sole reality, and as it transcends and besets the seeming universe, we begin to worship it in all creatures. This is the unitive bhajan or worship. When we thus worship Brahma or Guru wholeheartedly, we become one with him and attain self-realization. In short, always chanting the name of the Guru and meditating on him enables us to see him in all beings and confers eternal bliss on us. The following story will illustrate this. So the first story of this chapter is Kakasaheb's doubt and Anandrao's vision. It is well known that Sai Baba had enjoined Kakasaheb Dikshit to read daily 2 works of Sri Eknath. First one is Bhagavad and second is Bhavaratha Ramayana. Kakasaheb read this daily while Baba was living and he followed the practice even after Baba's passing away. Once in Kaka Mahajani's house in Chaupati, Mumbai, Kakasaheb was reading Eknathi Bhagavad in the morning. Madhavrao Deshpande alias Urf Shama and Kaka Mahajani were then present and listened attentively to the portion read. That is the second chapter, 11th skandha of the book. Therein, the 9 nathas or siddhas of the Rishabha family, that is Kavi, Hari, Antariksha, Parabuddha, Pipalayan, Avihotra, Drumil, Chamas, and Karabhajan expounded the principles of the Bhagavad Dharma to King Janak. The latter asked all the 9 nathas most important questions and each of them answered them satisfactorily. The first, that is Kavi, explained what is Bhagavad Dharma. Hari, the characteristics of Bhakta, that is devotee. Antariksha, what is Maya. Parabuddha, how to cross Maya. Pipalayan, what is a Parabrahma. Avirhotra, what is Karma. Drumil, the incarnations of God and their deeds. Chamas, how a non-devotee fares after death. Karabhajan, the different modes of worship of God in different ages. The substance of all the exposition was that in the Kali age the only means of liberation was the remembrance of Hari, that is Lord or Guru's feet. After the reading was over, Kakasaheb said in despondent tone to Madhavrao and others, "How wonderful is the discourse of the 9 nathas on bhakti or devotion, but at the same time, how difficult it is to put it into practice. The nathas were perfect, but it is possible for fools like us to attain devotion and delineated by them. We won't get it even after several births, then how are we to get salvation? It seems that there is no hope for us." Madhavrao did not like this pessimistic attitude of Kakasaheb. He said, "It is a pity that one who by his good luck got such a jewel, that is Guru as Baba, should cry out so despairingly. If he has unwavering faith in Baba, why should he feel restless? The bhakti of the nathas may be strong and powerful, but is not ours loving and affectionate? And has not Baba told us authoritatively that remembering and chanting Hari's and Guru's name confers salvation? Then, where is the cause for fear and anxiety?" Kakasaheb was not satisfied with the Madhavrao's explanation. He continued to be anxious and restless the whole day, thinking and brooding over how to get the powerful bhakti of the nathas. Next morning, the following miracle took place. One gentleman named Anandrao Pakhade came there in search of Madhavrao. The reading of the Bhagavad was then going on. Mr. Pakhade sat near Madhavrao and was whispering something to him. He was mentioning in low tone his dream vision. As there was some interruption in the reading by his whispering, Kakasaheb stopped the reading and asked Madhavrao what the matter was. The latter said, "Yesterday you expressed your doubt. Now here is the explanation of it." Here Mr. Pakhade's vision, explaining the characteristics of devotion and showing that the devotion in the form of bowing down to or worshipping of Guru's feet is sufficient. All were anxious to hear the vision, especially Kakasaheb. At their suggestion, Mr. Pakhade began to relate the vision as follows. "I was standing in deep sea in West deep water. There I saw Sai Baba all of a sudden. He was sitting on a beautiful throne studded with diamonds with his feet submerged in water. I was most pleased and satisfied with the form of Baba. The vision was so realistic that I never thought that it was a dream. Curiously enough, Madhavrao was also standing there. He said to me feelingly, 'Anandrao followed Baba's feet.' I rejoined, 'I also wish to do so, but his feet are in water. How can I place my head on them? I am helpless.' Hearing this, he said to Baba, 'O Deva, take out your feet which are under water.' Then Baba immediately took out his feet. I caught them without delay and bowed down to them. On seeing this, Baba blessed me, saying, "Go now, you will attain your welfare. This is no cause for fear and anxiety." He also added, "Give a silk bordered dhotar to my Shama, you will benefit thereby." In compliance with Baba's order, Mr. Pakhade had brought the dhotar and requested Kaka Sahib to hand it over to Madhav Rao, but the latter refused to accept it, saying that unless Baba gave a hint or suggestion for acceptance, he would not accept it. Then, after some discussion, Kaka Sahib decided to cast lots. It was the practice of Kaka Sahib to cast lots in all the significant matters and to abide by the decision as given in the picked up cheat. In this particular case, two cheats, on one of which has written to accept and on other to reject, were placed at feet of Baba, and a child was asked to pick one of them. The accept cheat was picked up and the dhotar was accepted by Madhav Rao. In this way, both Anand Rao and Madhav Rao were satisfied, and Kaka Sahib's difficulty was solved. This story exhorts us to give respect to the words of other saints, but at the same time asks us to have full faith in our mother, that is, the Guru, and abide by his instructions, for he knows our welfare better than any other person. Carve out on your heart the following words of Baba. There are innumerable saints in this world, but our Father, that is Guru, is the Father real Guru. Other might say many good things, but we should never forget our Guru's words. In short, love your Guru wholeheartedly, surrender to him completely, and prostrate yourself before him reverentially, and then you will see that there is no sea of mundane existence before you to cross, as there is no darkness for the sun. And the last story of this chapter is Wooden Plank, Baba's bedstead, and not Bhagat's. In his earlier days, Baba slept on a wooden plank, 4 arms in length and only a span in breadth, with panettes, that is, earthen lamps, burning at its 4 corners. Later on, he broke the plank into pieces and threw it away. Once, Baba was describing the greatness or importance of this plank to Kaka Sahib. On hearing this, the latter said to Baba, "If you still love the wooden plank, I will again suspend or hang up in the masjid for you to sleep at ease." Baba replied, "I won't like to sleep up leaving Marsapati down on the ground." Then Kaka Sahib said, "I will provide another plank for Marsapati too." Baba said, "How can he sleep on the plank? It is not easy to sleep on the plank. He who has many good qualities in him only can do so. He who can sleep with his eyes wide open can effect that. When I got to sleep, I often asked Marsapati to sit by my side, place his hand on my heart, and watch the chanting of the Lord's name there. And if he finds me sleepy, wake me up. He can't do even this. He himself gets drowsy and begins to nod his head when I feel his hand heavy as a stone on my heart and cry out, 'Oh Bhagat!' He moves and opens his eyes. How can he, who can't sit and sleep well on the ground, and whose asana, that is posture, is not steady, and who is slave to sleep, can sleep high up on a plank?" On many other occasions, Baba said, out of love for his devotees, "What is ours, that is, whether good or bad, is with us, and what is others is with them." And by this way, hearing great stories and leelas of Baba, we are ended with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. Now let's see chapter number 46, that is Baba's Gaya trip, and second, the story of goods. This chapter describes Shama's trip to Kashi, Prayag, and Gaya, and how Baba, that is, in the form of his portrait, was there ahead of him. It also describes Baba's reminiscence of the past birth of 2 goats. Preliminary. Blessed. O Sai, are your feet blessed is your remembrance, and blessed is your darshan which liberates us from the bond of karma. Though your form is invisible to us now, still if the devotees believe in you, they get living experience from you. By an invisible and subtle thread, you draw your devotees from far and near to your feet and embrace them like a kind and loving mother. The devotees do not know where you are, but you so skillfully pull the wires that they ultimately realize that you are behind them to help and support them. The intelligent wise and learned folk fall into the pit of a sansar on account of their egoism, but you save by your power the poor, simple, and devout person. Inwardly and invisibly, you play all the game but show that you are not concerned with it, while you do things but pose yourself as a non-doer. Nobody ever knows your life. The best course, therefore, for us is to surrender our body, speech, and mind to your feet, and always chant your name to destroy our sins. You fulfill the wishes of the devotees, and to those who are without any desire, you give bliss supreme. The chanting of your sweet name is the easiest sadhana for devotees. By this sadhana, our sins, that is pap, rajas, and tamas qualities, will vanish. The sattva qualities and righteous will gain predominance, and along with this, discrimination, dispassion, and knowledge will follow. Then we shall abide in ourself and our Guru, that is, who are one and the same. That is what is called complete surrender to the Guru. The only sure sign of this is that our mind gets calm and peaceful. The greatness of this surrender, devotion, and knowledge is unique for peace, non-attachment, fame, and salvation, etc. come on its wake. If Baba accepts a devotee, he follows him and stands by him day and night at his home or abroad. Let the devotee go anywhere he likes. Baba is there ahead of him in some form in an unconceivable manner. The following story illustrates this. First story, that is of Gaya trip. Sometime after Kaka Sahib Dikshit was introduced to Sai Baba, he decided to perform the thread, that is Upanayan ceremony of his eldest son Babu at Nagpur. At about the same time, Nana Sahib Chandorkar decided to perform the marriage ceremony of his eldest son at Gwalior. Both Dikshit and Chandorkar came to Shirdi and lovingly invited Baba for these functions. Baba asked them to take Shama as his representative. When he was pressed to come in person, Baba told them to take Shama with them and said, after doing Banaras and Prayag, we would be ahead of Shama. Now, mark these words, for they show Baba's all-pervasiveness. After taking the permission of Baba, Shama decided to go to Nagpur and Gwalior for these functions and ceremonies, and then to Kashi, Prayag, and Gaya. Appakote made up his mind to accompany him. They both went first to Nagpur for the thread ceremony. Kaka Sahib Dikshit gave Shama rupees 200 for his expenses. Then they went to Gwalior for the marriage ceremony. There Nana Sahib Chandorkar gave Shama rupees 100 and his Vyahi, that is relative, Mr. Jathar, gave him also rupees 100. Then Shama went to Kashi and then to Ayodhya. He was well received in Jathar's beautiful temple of Lakshmi Narayan at Kashi, that is Varanasi or Banaras, and in the Ram Mandir at Ayodhya by Jathar's manager. They, means Shama and Kote, stayed for 21 days in Ayodhya and 2 months in Kashi, that is Banaras. Then they left for Gaya. In the train they felt little uneasy on hearing that plague was reveling in Gaya. At night they alighted at Gaya station and stayed in the Dharmashala. In the morning the Gayawala, that is the priest who arranges for the lodging and boarding of the pilgrims, came there and said, "The pilgrims have already started, you better make haste." Shama casually asked him whether there was plague in Gaya. "No," said the Gayawala. "Please come without any fear or anxiety and see yourself." Then they went with him and stayed in his house, which was a big and spacious wada. Shama was pleased with the accommodation provided to him, but what pleased him most was the beautiful big portrait of Baba fixed in the central and front portion of this building. On seeing this portrait, Shama was overwhelmed with emotions. He remembered Baba's words, that is, after doing Kashi and Prayag, we would be ahead of Shama. and burst into tears. His hair stood on end, his throat was choked, and he began to sob. The Gayawala thought that he was afraid of plague prevailing there and therefore was crying. But Shama inquired for him how he got Baba's portrait there. He replied that he had 200 or 300 agents working at Manmad and Puntambe for looking after the convenience of the pilgrims to Gaya, and from them he heard about Baba's fame. Then, about 12 years ago, he went to Shirdi and took Baba's darshan. There he was attracted by Baba's portrait hung in Shama's house, and with Baba's permission Shama gave it to him. This was the same portrait. Shama then remembered this incident. The Gayawala's joy knew no bounds when he learned that the same Shama who obliged him before was his guest now. Then they both exchanged love and service and were most delighted and happy. The Gayawala gave him a royal welcome. He was a very rich man. He sat in a palanquin and made Shama ride an elephant and attended to all his comforts and convenience. The moral of the story is that Baba's words came out true to the letter, and unbounded was his love towards the devotees. But leave this aside, he also loved all creatures equally, for he felt that he was one with them. The following story will illustrate this. And so the next story is about two goats. Baba was once returning from Lendi when he saw a flock of goats. Two of them attracted his attention. He went to them, cursed and flaunted them, and bought them for rupees 32. The devotees were surprised at this conduct of Baba. They thought that Baba was duped in his bargain, as the goat would fetch rupees 2 each, or at the most rupees 3 or 4 each, that is rupees 8 for both. They began to take Baba to task for this, but Baba kept calm and cool. Shama and Tata Kote asked Baba for an explanation. He said he did not care to store money, as he had no home or family to look after. He asked them to purchase at his cost 4 seers of dal, that is lentil, and feed the goats. After this was done, Baba returned the goats to the owner of the flock and gave out the following reminiscence and story of the goats. Oh Shama and Tata, you think that I have been deceived in this bargain? No. Listen to their story. In their former birth, they were human beings and had the good fortune to be with me and sit by my side. They were Uterite brothers, loving each other initially, but later on they became enemies. The elder brother was an idle fellow, while the younger one was an active chap and earned a lot of money. The former became greedy and jealous and wanted to kill his younger brother and take away his money. They forgot their fraternal relations and began to quarrel with each other. The elder brother resorted to many devices to kill his younger brother, but all his attempts failed. Thus, they became deadly enemies, and finally, on one occasion, the elder gave a deadly blow with a big stick on the latter's head, while the latter struck the former with an axe, with the result that both fell dead on the spot. As the result of their actions, they were both born as goats. As they passed by me, I at once recognized them. I remembered their past history. By taking pity on them, I wanted to feed them and give them rest and comfort, and for this reason I spent all the money, for which you blame me. As you did not like my bargain, I sent them back to their shepherd. Such was Sai's love for the goats. And by this way we are done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. Now let's see chapter number 47, that is Baba's Reminiscence. This is the story of Veerbhadrappa and Chinnabasappa, that is snake and frog. The last chapter described Baba's reminiscence about two goats. This chapter describes more such reminiscence and relates the story to Veerbhadrappa and Chinnabasappa. Preliminary. Blessed is the face of Sai. If we cast a glance at him or a moment, he destroys the sorrows of many past births and confers great bliss on us. And if he looks at us with grace, our bondage of karma is immediately snapped away and we are led to happiness. The river Ganges washes away the dirt and sins of all people who go to her for a bath, but she intently longs for the saints to come to her and bless her with the touch of their feet and remove all the fleet that is sins accumulated in her. She knows for a certain that this can only be removed by the holy feet of saints. Sai is the spiritual of the saints, and now hear from him the following purifying story. That is the story of the snake and the frog. Sai Baba said, one morning after taking my breakfast, I strolled along till I came to a small river bank. As I was tired, I rested there, washed my hands and feet, and had a bath and felt refreshed. There was a footpath and a cart track sheltered by shady trees. The breeze was also blowing gently. As I was preparing to smoke chilim, that is pipe, I heard the croaking of a frog. I was striking the flint and lighting the fire when a traveller turned up, sat by my side, bowed down to me, and politely invited me to his house for meals and rest. He lit up the pipe and handed it over to me. The croaking was heard again, and he wanted to know what it was. I told him that a frog was in trouble and was tasting the bitter fruit of its own karma. We have to reap now the fruit of what we sow in our past life, and there is no use crying about it now. Then he smoked and handed over the pipe to me and said that he would go there in person and see for himself. I told him that a frog was caught by a big snake and was crying. Both were very wicked in their past life and were now reaping the fruit of their past actions in the present bodies. He went and found that a huge black serpent, that is snake, was holding a big frog in its mouth. He returned to me and said that in about 10 or 12 minutes the frog would be eaten up by the snake. I said, no, this can't be. I am its father, that is the protector, and I am here now. How shall I allow the snake to eat it up? Am I here for nothing? Just see how I release it. After smoking again, we walked up place to place. He was afraid and asked me not to proceed further as the snake might attack us. Not minding him, I went ahead and addressed the creatures thus. O Veerbhadrappa, has not your enemy Basappa yet repented? Though he has been born as a frog, and you too, though born as a serpent, that is snake, still hold bitter enmity against him? Be ashamed of yourself. Give up your hatred now and rest in peace. On hearing these words, the snake left the frog quickly and dived into the river and disappeared. The frog also jumped away and hid itself in the bushes. The traveller was much surprised. He said that he could not understand how the snake dropped the frog and disappeared on hearing the words. Who was Veerbhadrappa and who was Basappa, and what was the cause of their enmity? I returned with him to the foot of the tree, and after sharing again a few puffs of smoke with him, I explained the whole mystery to him as follows. There was an ancient holy place sanctified by a temple of Mahadev about 4 or 5 miles from my place. The temple was old and dilapidated. The residents of the place collected funds for its repair. After a large amount was collected, arrangement for worship was made and plans with estimates for repairs were prepared. A rich local man was appointed the treasurer and the whole work was entrusted to him. He was to keep regular accounts and be honest in all his dealings. He was a first-class miser and spent very little for the repairs, which consequently made very little progress. He spent all the funds, swallowed some amount himself, and spent nothing from his pocket. He had a sweet tongue and was very clever in offering plausible explanations regarding the poor and tardy progress of the work. The people again went to him and said that unless he lent his helping hand and tried his best, the work would be not complete. They requested him to work out the scheme and again collected subscription and sent the amount to him. He received it but sat as quiet as before without making any progress. After some days, God, that is Mahadev, appeared in his wife's dream and said to her, You get up, build the dome of the temple. I will give you 100-fold of what you spent. She told this vision to her husband. He was afraid that it would involve him in expense and therefore laughed it off, saying that it was a merry dream, a thing not to be relied and acted upon, or else why not God appear to him in the dream and tell him about it? Was he far off from her? This looks like a bad dream having its object in the creation of ill feeling between husband and wife. She had to remain quiet. God does not like big subscriptions and donations collected against the wishes of the donors, but He likes ever trifling amounts given with love, devotion, and gratitude. Some days after, God again appeared in his dream and said her, "Do not bother yourself about your husband and the collections with him. Don't press him to spend any money for the temple. What I want is bhava and devotion. So, give if you like anything of your own." She consulted her husband about this vision and decided to give God her ornaments given by her father. The miser felt disconcerted and decided to cheat even God in this item. He undervalued the ornament at ₹1,000 and bought them himself, and in lieu of the amount gave a barren field to God as endowment or security. The wife agreed to this. The field or land was not his own. It belonged to one poor woman named Dupki, who mortgaged it to him for ₹200. She was not able to redeem it for long. So the cunning miser cheated all, his wife, Dupki, and even God. The land was sterile, uncultivated, and worth nothing and yielded nothing, even in the best season. Thus ended this transaction, and the land was given in the possession of the poor priest, who was pleased with the endowment. Some time later, strange thing happened. There was a terrific storm and a heavy downpour. Lightning struck the house of the miser when he and his wife both died. Dupki also breathed her last. In the next life, the rich miser was born at Mathura in a Brahmin family and was named Veerbhadrappa. His devout wife was born as the daughter of the priest of the temple and was named Gauri. The woman Dupki, that is, the mortgagger, was born as a male in the family of the Gaurav, that is, attendant of the temple, and was named Chenavasappa. The priest was a friend of mine. He often came to me, chatted, and smoked with me. His daughter Gauri was also devoted to me. She was growing fast, and her father was seeking a good husband for her. I told him not to worry about this, as the bridegroom himself would come seeking her. Then there came a poor boy named Veerbhadrappa wandering and begging his bread to the priest's house. With my consent, Gauri was given in a marriage to him. He was also devoted to me initially, as I recommended his marriage with Gauri, but later became miser. Even in this new life, he was hankering after money and asked me to help him to get it, as he was leading a married man's life. Strange thing happened. There was a sudden rise in prices. By Gauri's good luck, there was a great demand for land, and the land was sold for 1 lakh rupees, that is 100 times the worth of her ornaments. Half the amount was paid in cash, and the remaining was to be paid in 25 installments or ₹2,000 each. All agreed to this transaction but began to quarrel over the money. They came to me for consultation. I told them the property belonged to God and was vested in the priest, and that Gauri was his sole heiress and proprietress, and no amount should be spent without her consent, and that her husband had no right whatsoever to the amount. On hearing my opinion, Veerbhadrappa was annoyed with me and said that I wanted to establish Gauri's claim and embellished her property. On hearing these words, I remembered God and kept quiet. Veerbhadrappa scolded his wife, that is Gauri, and she came to me at noon and requested me not to mind the words of others and not to discard her, as she was my daughter. As she thus sought my protection, I gave her pledge that I would cross 7 seas to help her. Then, that night, Gauri had a vision. Mahadev appeared in her dream and said, "The whole money is yours. Do not give anything to anybody. Spend some amount for temple purpose in consultation with Chenabasappa, and if you want to use it for some other purpose, consult Baba in the masjid." That is myself. Gauri told me the vision and I gave her proper advice in the matter. I told her to take the principal or capital amount to herself, give half the amount of interest to Chenabasappa, and that Veerabhadrappa had nothing to do in the matter. While I was thus talking, both Veerabhadrappa and Chenabasappa came there quarreling. I tried my best to pacify them and told them of God's vision to Gauri. Veerabhadrappa got wild and angry and threatened to kill Chenabasappa, cutting him to pieces. The latter was timid. He caught my feet and sought refuge in me. I plagued myself to save him from the warmth of its foe. Then, after some time, Veerabhadrappa died and was born as a snake, as Chenabasappa died and was born as a frog. On hearing the croaking of Chenabasappa and remembering my plague, I came here, saved him, and kept my words. God runs to his devotees for help in times of danger. He saved Chenabasappa by sending me here. All this is God's lila or sport. So the moral of this story is, one has to reap what one sows, and there is no escape unless one suffers and squares up one's old debts and dealing with others, and that greed for money drags the greedy man to the lowest level and ultimately brings destruction for him and others. And by this way, taking the great moral of this story, where we have ended with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. Chapter number 48. Warding of devotees' calamities. In this chapter, we are going to see story of first Shevade and second Sapatnikar. At the commencement of this chapter, someone asked Hemadpan whether Sai Baba was a guru or Sadguru. In order to answer the question, Hemadpan describes the signs and mark of the Sadguru as follows. Signs of Sadguru. He who teaches us Ved and Vedanta or the 6 Shastras, that is systems. He who controls the breath or brands his body with mudras, that is metallic mark of Vishnu's weapon, or gives pleasing discourses regarding Brahma. He who gives mantras, that is sacred syllables, to the disciples and orders them to chant the same a certain number of times but does not assure them any result in a definite time. He who by his lengthy gross knowledge explains beautifully the ultimate principle but has himself got no experience or self-realization is not a Sadguru. But he who by his discourse creates in us a distaste for the enjoyments of this world and the next and gives us a taste of self-realization, who is well versed in both the theoretical and practical knowledge, that is self-realization, deserves to be called a Sadguru. How can he who is himself devoid of self-realization give it to the disciples? A Sadguru does not ever in his dream expect any service or profit from his disciples. On the contrary, he wishes to serve them. He does not think that he is a great and the disciple small. Not only he loves him and his son, but regards him as equal to himself or as Brahma. The main characteristic of a Sadguru is that he is the abode of peace. He is never restless nor ruffled. He has no pride of his learning. The poor and the rich, the small as the great, are the same to him. Hemadpan thinks that on account of the store of accumulation of merits in his past births, he had the good fortune of meeting and being blessed by such a Sadguru as Sai Baba. Even in full youth, he hoarded nothing, that is, except chilim perhaps. He had no family, no friend, no home, nor any support. Since he was 18, his control of mind was perfect and extraordinary. He lived fearlessly in scheduled places and always abided in his self. On seeing the pure attachment of his devotees, he always acted in their interest and hence he was in a way dependent on them. What experience he gave to his devotees while he was living in his flesh are felt even today after his Mahasamadhi by those who attach themselves to him. What the devotees have to do is this: they have to trim their heart lamp of faith and devotion and burn it in a wicks of love, and when it is done, the flame of knowledge, that is self realization, will be lit up and shine bright. Merry knowledge without love is dry. Nobody wants such knowledge. Without love, there is no contentment, so we should have unbroken and unbounded love. How can we praise love? Everything is insignificant before it. Without love, our reading, hearing, and the study are of no avail. In the wake of love come devotion, dispassion, peace, and liberation with all rare treasures. We do not get love for anything unless we feel earnestly about it. So, where there is real yearning, God manifests Himself. It includes love and is the means of liberation. Now, let us revert to the main story of this chapter. A man should go to a true saint with a pure mind, or even otherwise, that is fraudulently, and hold his feet. Ultimately, he is sure to be saved. This is illustrated by the following stories. So, the next story is of Mr. Shevade. Mr. Sapatnekar of Akkalkot, that is of Solapur district, was studying law. A co-student, Mr. Shevade, met him. Other fellow students also got together and compared notes of their study. It was found by the questions and answers amongst themselves that Mr. Shevade was the least prepared of all for the examination, and therefore all the students derided him. But he said that though he was not prepared, he was sure to pass the examination, as his Sai Baba was there to get him through it successfully. Mr. Sapatnekar was surprised at his remark. He took Mr. Shevade aside and asked him who this Sai Baba is, whom he extols so high. He replied, "There lives in a masjid in Shirdi, that is Ahmednagar district, a fakir. He is a great Satapurush. There may be other saints, but this one is unique. Unless there is a great store of merits on one's account, one can't see him. I fully believe in him, and what he says will never be untrue. He has assured me that I will pass definitely next year, and I am confident that I will get through the final examination by his grace." Mr. Sapatnekar laughed at his friend's confidence and jeered at him and Baba. Later, when Shevade passed his exam successfully, it made Sapatnekar quite surprised. And now, let's see the next story, that is Sapatnekars. Mr. Sapatnekar passed his examination, settled at Akkalkot, and practiced as a pleader there. 10 years after this, that is in 1913, he lost his only son on account of a throat disease. This broke his heart. He sought relief by making a pilgrimage to Pandharpur, Gangapur, and other holy places. He got no peace of mind. Then he read the Vedanta, which also did not help him. In the meanwhile, he remembered Mr. Shevade's remark and his faith in Baba, and he thought that he too should go to Shirdi and see Baba. He went to Shirdi with his younger brother Pandit Rao and was much pleased to see Baba from a distance. When he went near and prostrated himself and placed a coconut before Baba with feeling of devotion, the latter at once cried out, "Get away!" Sapatnekar hummed down his head, moved back, and sat aside. He wanted to consult somebody who would advise him how to proceed. Somebody mentioned Bala Shimpi's name. Sapatnekar saw him and sought his help. They bought Baba photos and came with them to the masjid. Bala Shimpi took a photo in his hand, gave it to Baba, and asked him whose photo it was. Baba said that this photo was of the Yar, that is lover of him, pointing to Sapatnekar. Saying this, Baba laughed and all others joined. Bala asked Baba the significance of the laugh and beckoned Sapatnekar to come forward and take darshan. When Sapatnekar began to prostrate himself, Baba again cried, "Get out!" Sapatnekar did not know what to do. Then they both joined their hands and sat before Baba praying. Baba finally ordered Sapatnekar to clear out immediately. Both were sad and dejected. As Baba's order had to be obeyed, Sapatnikar left Shirdi with a heavy heart, praying that he should be allowed to take darshan next time. And now let's see the next story, that is Mrs. Sapatnikar. 1 year elapsed. Still his mind was not at peace. He went to Gangapur, where he felt more restless. Then he went to Madhegaon for rest and finally decided to go to Kashi. 2 days before starting, his wife got a vision. In her dream, she was going with a pitcher to Lakad Shah's well. There a fakir with a piece of cloth tied around his head, sitting at the foot of the neem tree, came close to her and said, "My dear Lassi, why get exhausted for nothing? I get your pitcher filled with pure water." She was afraid of the fakir and hastened back with the empty pitcher. The fakir followed her. At this, she was woke up and opened her eyes. She told this vision to her husband. They thought that this was an auspicious sign that they both left for Shirdi. When they reached the masjid, Baba was absent. He had gone to Lendi. They waited till his return. When he returned, she was surprised to see that the fakir she saw in her vision exactly resembled Baba. She reverentially prostrated herself before Baba and sat down looking at him. On seeing her humility, Baba was much pleased and began to tell a story in his peculiar characteristic manner to a third party. He said, "My arms, abdomen and waist have been paining for a long time. I took many medicines, the pain did not abate. I got sick of the medicines as they gave me no relief, but I am surprised to see now that all the pains have disappeared at once." Though no name was mentioned, it was the story of Mrs. Sapatnikar herself. Her pains, as described by Baba, left her soon and she was happy. Then Mr. Sapatnikar went ahead to take darshan. He was again welcomed with the former "Get out." This time he was more penitent and persevering. He said that Baba's displeasure was due to his past deeds and resolved to make amends for the same. He determined to see Baba alone and ask him pardon for his past actions. He placed his head on Baba's feet and Baba placed his hand on him and Sapatnikar sat stroking Baba's legs. Then a shepherd came and sat massaging Baba's back. Baba, in his characteristic way, began to tell the story of a baniya. He related the various vicissitudes of all his life, including the death of his only son. Sapatnikar was surprised to see that the story which Baba related was his own, and he wondered how Baba knew every detail of it. He came to understand that he was omniscient and knew the hearts of all. When this thought crossed his mind, Baba, still addressing the shepherds and pointing to Sapatnikar, said, "This fellow blames me and charges me with the killing of his son. Do I kill people's children? Why does this fellow come to the masjid and cry? Now I will do this. I will again bring that very child back in his wife's womb." With this word, he placed his blessing hand on his head and comforted him, saying, "These feet are old and holy, and you are carefree now. Place entire faith in me, and you will soon get your object." Sapatnikar was much moved with emotion. He bathed Baba's feet with his tears and then returned to his residence. Then he made preparations for worship and Nevedya and came with his wife to the masjid. He offered all this to Baba and accepted prasad from him. There was a crowd in the masjid and Sapatnikar went there and saluted Baba again and again. On seeing heads clashing against heads, Baba said to Sapatnikar, "Oh, why do you prostrate yourself now and then? One namaskar offered with love and humility is enough." Then Sapatnikar witnessed that night the Chaudi procession described earlier. In that procession, Baba looked like a veritable Panduranga, that is Vitthal. At the parting next day, Sapatnikar thought that he should first pay 1 rupee as dakshina, and if Baba asked again, instead of saying no, he should pay 1 more, reserving with him sufficient amount as expenses for the journey. When he went to the masjid and offered 1 rupee, Baba asked for another as per his intention, and when it was paid, Baba blessed him, saying, "Take the coconut, put in your wife's oti, that is upper fold of her sari, and go away without the least anxiety." He did so. Within a year, a son was born to him, and with an infant of 8 months, the couple came to Shirdi, placed him at Baba's feet, and prayed thus: "O Sainath, we do not know how to repay your obligations. Therefore, we prostrate ourselves before you. Bless us, poor, helpless fellows. Henceforth, let your holy feet be our sole refuge. Many thoughts and ideas trouble us in waking and dream state, so turn away our mind from them to your bhajan and bless us." The son was named Murlidhar. Two others, that is Bhaskar and Dinkar, were born afterwards. The Sapatnekar couple thus realized that Baba's words were never untrue and unfulfilled. So by this way, we are done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. And now here is chapter number 49. The story is about first Hari Kanoba, second Somadev Swami, third Nanasaheb Chandorkar. Preliminary. When even the Vedas and the Puranas cannot sufficiently praise, that is describe Brahma or Sadguru, then how can we ignorant describe our Sadguru Sri Sai Baba? We think that it is better for us to keep quiet in this matter. In reality, the observance of the vow of silence is the best way of praising the Sadguru, but the divine qualities of Sai Baba make us forget our vow of silence and inspire us to open our mouth. Tasteful dishes lose their taste if there is no company of friends and relatives to partake the dishes with us. But when they join us, the dishes acquire additional flavor. The same is the case with Sri Sai Lilamrit, the nectar in the form of Sai Leelas. The nectar we cannot partake alone. Friends and brothers have to join us. The more, the better. It is Sai Baba himself who inspires these stories and gets them written as he desires. Our duty is to surrender completely to him and meditate on him. Practicing penance is better than pilgrimage, vow, sacrifice and charity. Worshipping Hari, that is Lord, is better than penance, and meditation on the Sadguru is the best of all. We have, therefore, to chant Sai's name, think over his saying in our mind, meditate on his form, feel true love for him in our heart, and do all our actions for his sake. There is no better means than this for snapping the bondage of this sansar. If we can do our duty on our part, as stated above, Sai is bound to help and liberate us. Now, we revert to the stories of this chapter. First story is of Hari Kanoba. A gentleman of Mumbai named Hari Kanoba heard from his friend and relatives many Leelas of Baba. He did not believe in them as he had a doubting mind. He wanted to see Sai Baba himself. So he came to Shirdi with some Mumbai friends. He wore a lace-bordered turban on his head and a new pair of sandals on his feet. On seeing Babas from a distance, he thought of going to him and prostrating himself before him. He did not know what to do about his new sandals. After going one corner in the open courtyard, he placed them there and went in the masjid and had Baba's darshan. He made a reverential bow to Baba, took Udi and Prasad from Baba and returned. When he reached the corner, he found to his utter dismay that his sandals had disappeared. He searched for them in vain and returned to his lodging very much dejected. He bathed, offered worship and Nevedya and sat down for meals, but all this while he was thinking about nothing but his sandals. After finishing his meals, he came out to wash his hands. When he saw a Maratha boy coming towards him, he held in his hand a stick, at the end of which was hanging a pair of new sandals. He said to the men who had come out to wash their hands that Baba sent him with this stick in hand and asked him to go on the streets crying, "Hari ka beta, Zari ka petha," and that if anybody claims these sandals first, assure yourself that his name is Hari and that he is the son of Ka, that is Kanoba, and that he wears a lace bordered turban, and then give them over to him. On hearing this, Hari Kanoba was pleasantly surprised. He went ahead to the boy and claimed the sandals as his own. He said to the boy that his name was Hari and that he was a son of Ka, that is Kanoba, and showed him his lace bordered turban. The boy was satisfied and returned the sandals to him. Hari Kanoba wondered in his mind that his lace bordered turban was visible to all and Baba might have seen it. But how could he know that his name was Hari and that he was the son of Kanoba, as this was his first trip to Shirdi? He came there with the sole object of testing Baba and with no other motive. He came to know by this incident that Baba was a great Satapurush. He got what he wanted and returned home well pleased. Next story is of Somadev Swami. Now, hear the story of another man who came to try Baba. Bhaiji's brother of Kaka Dikshit was staying at Nagpur. When he had gone to the Himalayas in 1906, he made an acquaintance with one Somadev Swami of Haridwar at Uttarkashi down to Gangotri Valley. Both took down each other's name in their diaries. 5 years later, Somadev Swami came to Nagpur and was Bhaiji's guest. There he was pleased to hear the Leelas of Baba and a strong desire arose in his mind to go to Shirdi and see him. He got a letter of introduction from Bhaiji and left for Shirdi. After passing Manmad and Kopargaon, he took a tanga and drove to Shirdi. As he came near Shirdi, he saw 2 flags floating high over the masjid in Shirdi. Generally, we find different behavior, different mode of living, and different outward paraphernalia with different scents. But these outward signs should never be our standards to judge the worth of a saint. But with Somadev Swami, it was a different. As soon as he saw the flags flying, he thought, why should a son take a liking for the flags? Does this denote sainthood? It implies the saint hankering after fame. Thinking thus, he wished to cancel his Shirdi trip and said to his fellow travelers that he would go back. They said to him, then why did you come so far? If your mind became restless by the merry sight of the flags, how much more agitated would you be on seeing the rath, the palanquin, the horse, and all other paraphernalia in Shirdi? The Swami got more confounded and said, not sadhu with horses, palanquins, and toms have I seen, and it is better for me to return than visit such a sadhu. After saying this, he started to return. The fellow travelers pressed him not to do so but to proceed. They asked him to stop his inconsistent way of thinking and told him that the sadhu, that is Baba, did not care a bit for the flags and the other paraphernalia nor for the name. It was the people, his devotees, who kept up all this paraphernalia out of love and devotion to him. Finally, he was persuaded to continue his journey, go to Shirdi and see Baba. When he went and saw Baba from the courtyard, he melted inside, his eyes were full of tears, his throat was choked, and all his evil and crooked thoughts vanished. He remembered his Guru saying that is our abode and place of rest where the mind is most pleased and settled. He wished to roll himself in the dust at Baba's feet, and when he approached Baba, the latter got wild and cried aloud, let all our humbug, that is paraphernalia, be with us. You go back to your home. Beware if you come back to this masjid again. Why take the darshan of one who flies a flag over his masjid? Is this a sign of sainthood? Remain here not a moment. The Swami was taken aback by surprise. He realized that Baba read his heart and spoke it out. How omniscient he was! He knew that he was least intelligent and that Baba was noble and pure. He saw Baba embracing somebody, touching someone with his hand, comforting others, staring kindly at some, laughing at others, giving Udi Prasad to some, and thus pleasing and satisfying all. Why should he alone be dealt so harshly? After thinking seriously, he came to realize that Baba's conduct responded exactly to his inner thought and that he should take a lesson from this and improve, and that Baba's warmth was a blessing in disguise. This is needless to say that later on his faith in Baba was confirmed and he became a staunch devotee of Baba. And the another story is of Nana Sahib Chandorkar, which is the last story of this chapter. Hemadpan concludes this chapter with a story of Nana Sahib Chandorkar. Nana Sahib was once sitting in the masjid with Mahalsapati and others. A Mohammedan gentleman from Bijapur came with his family to see Baba. On seeing veiled ladies with him, Nana Sahib wanted to go away, but Baba prevented him from doing so. The ladies came and took the darshan of Baba. When one of the ladies removed their veil for saluting Baba's feet, Nana Sahib, who had a glimpse of her face, was so much smitten with her beauty that he wished to see her face again. Knowing Nana's restlessness of mind, Baba spoke to him after the lady had left the place. Nana, why are you getting agitated in vain? Let the saints do their allotted work or duty. We should not meddle with their work. God had created this beautiful world and it is our duty to appropriate its beauty. The mind will get steady and calm slowly and gradually. When the front door was open, why go by the back one? When the heart is pure, there is no difficulty whatsoever. Why should one be afraid of anyone if there be no evil thought in us? The eyes may do their work. Why should you feel shy and tottering? Shama was there and he could not follow the meaning of what Baba said. So, he asked Nana about this on their way home. Nana told him about his restlessness and the sight of the beautiful lady, how Baba knew it and advised him about it. Nana explained Baba's meaning as follows: that our mind is fickle by nature, it should not be allowed to get wild. The sense may get restless, the body, however, should be held in check and not allowed to be impatient. Senses run after object, but our desire we should not follow them and crave for them. By slow and gradual practice, restlessness can be conquered. We should not be swayed by the sense, though they cannot be completely controlled. We should curb them rightly and properly according to the need of the occasion. Beauty is the subject of sight. We may fearlessly look at the beauty of object. There is no room for shyness or fear. Only we should never entertain evil thoughts. Making the mind desireless observes God's works of beauty. In this way, the sense will be easily and naturally controlled, and even in enjoying objects, you will be reminded of God. If the outer senses are not held in check, and if the mind be allowed to run after objects and be attached to them, our cycle of births and deaths will not come to an end. With Vivek, that is discrimination, as our charioteer, we will control the mind and shall not allow the sense to go astray. With such a charioteer, we reach the Vishnupada, the final abode, our real home, from where there is no return. And by this way, we have done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. Now we are going to see chapter number 50. That is stories of first Kaka Sahib Dikshit, second Sri Tembe Swami, and third Balaram Dhurandhar. Before starting the chapter, here is the note given that chapter 50 of the original Satacharitra has been incorporated in chapter 39 as it dealt with the same subject matter. Now, chapter 51 of Satacharitra has been treated here as chapter 50. This chapter gives the stories of Kaka Sahib Dikshit, second Sri Tembe Swami, and third Balaram Dhurandhar. And now, let's start. Preliminary. Victory be unto Sai, who is the mainstay of the Bhaktas, who is our Sadguru, who expounds the meaning of the Gita and who gives us all powers. O Sai, look favorably on us and bless us all. The sandalwood trees grows on a Malya mountains and ward of heat. The clouds pour their rainwater and thereby cool and refreshes all the people. The flowers blossom in the spring and enable us to worship God therewith. So the stories of Sai Baba come forth in order to give solace and comfort to the readers. Both those who tell and those who hear the stories of Baba are blessed and holy. It is a well established fact that though we try hundreds of means or sadhanas, we do not attain the spiritual goal of life unless a Sadguru blesses us with his grace. Here the following story in illustration of this statement. So we move towards the first story, that is of Kaka Sahib Dikshit. Mr. Hari Sitaram alias म्हणजेच उर्फ काकासाहेब Dikshit was born in 1864 in a Vadanagar Nagar in a Brahmin family at Khandwa, that is Central Province. His primary education was done at Khandwa, Hinganghat, and secondary education at Nagpur. He came to Mumbai for higher education and studied first in the Wilson College and then in the Elphinstone College. After graduation in 1883, he passed his LLB and solicitor's examination and then served in the firm of the government solicitors Mr. Little and Co. and then after some time started a solicitor's firm of his own. Before 1909, Sai Baba's name was not familiar to Kaka Sahib, but after that he soon became his great devotee. While he was staying at Lonavala, he happened to see his old friend Mr. Nanasaheb Chandorkar. Both spent some time in talking about many things. Kaka Sahib described to him how while he was boarding a train in London, he met with an accident in which his foot slipped and was injured. Hundreds of remedies gave him no relief. Nana Sahib then told him that if he wished to get rid of pain and lameness of his leg, he should go to his Sadguru, that is Sai Baba. He also gave him all the particulars of Sai Baba and mentioned to him Sai Baba's dictum. I draw to me my man from far off or even across the seven seas, like a sparrow with a string fastened to its feet. He also made it clear to him that if he was not Baba's man, he would not be attracted to him and given darshan. Kaka Sahib was pleased to hear all this and said to Nana Sahib that he would go to Baba, see him and pray to him to cure not so much his lame leg, but bring round his lame fickle mind and give him eternal bliss. Some time after, Kaka Sahib went to Ahmednagar and stayed with Sirdar Kaka Sahib Mirikar in connection with securing votes for a seat in the Mumbai Legislative Council. Mr. Balasaheb Mirikar, son of Kaka Sahib Mirikar, who was a Mamlatdar of Kopargaon, also came at that time to Ahmednagar in connection with a horse exhibition there. After the election business was over, Kaka Sahib Dikshit wanted to go to Shirdi and both the Mirikars, fathers and son, were also thinking about a fit and proper person as a guide with whom he should be sent there. There Sai Baba was arranging things for his reception. Shama got a telegram from his father-in-law at Ahmednagar stating that his wife was seriously ill and that he should come to see her with his wife. Shama with Baba's permission went there and saw his mother-in-law and found her improving and better. Nana Sahib Panse and Appa Sahib Gadre happened to see Shama on their way to the exhibition and they told him to go to Mirikar's house, see Kaka Sahib Dikshit there and take him to Shirdi along with him. Kaka Sahib Dikshit and the Mirikars were also informed of Shama's arrival. In the evening, Shama came to Mirikars who introduced him to Kaka Sahib. They arranged that Shama should leave for Kopargaon with Kaka Sahib by the 10 o'clock night train. After this was settled, a curious thing happened. Balasaheb Mirikar threw aside the veil or covering on Baba's big portrait and showed the same to Kaka Sahib. He was surprised to see that he, whom he was going to meet at Shirdi, was already there in the form of his portrait to greet him at his juncture. He was much moved and made his prostration before the portrait. This portrait belonged to Megha. The glass over it was broken and it was sent to Mirikars for repairs. The necessary repairs had been already made and it was decided to return the portrait with Kaka Sahib and Shama. Before 10 o'clock, they went to the station and booked their passage. But when the train arrived, they found that the second class was overcrowded and that there was no room for them. Fortunately, the guard of the train turned out to be an acquaintance of Kaka Sahib and he put them up in the first class. Thus, They travelled comfortably and alighted at Kopargaon. Their joy knew no bounds when they saw their Nanasaheb Chandorkar, who was also bound for Shirdi. Kakasaheb and Nanasaheb embraced each other, and then, after bathing in the sacred Godavari river, they started for Shirdi. After coming there and getting Baba's darshan, Kakasaheb's mind was melted, his eyes were full of tears, and he was overflowing with joy. Baba said to him that he was also waiting for him and had sent Shama ahead to receive him. Kakasaheb then passed many happy years in Baba's company. He built a vada in Shirdi, which he made as his more or less the permanent home. The experiences he got from Baba are so manifold, and it is not possible to relate them all here. The readers are advised to read a special, that is Kakasaheb Dikshit, number of Sri Sai Leela magazine. We close this account with the mention of one fact only. Baba had comforted him by saying that in the end he will take him in air coach, that is Viman, that is secure him a happy death. This came out true on the 5th July, that is 1926. He was travelling in the train with Hemad Pant and talking about Sai Baba. He seemed deeply engrossed in Sai Baba. All of a sudden he threw his neck on Hemad Pant's shoulder and breathed his last with no trace of pain and uneasiness. And now let's see the last point of this chapter, that is the last story of Sri Tembe Swami. We come to next story, which shows how saints love each other with fraternal affection. Once Sri Vasudevananda Saraswati, known as Sri Tembe Swami, encamped at Raja Mahendri, that is Andhra country, on the banks of the Godavari. He was devout, orthodox, Jnani and Yogi Bhakta of the Dattatreya. One Mr. Pundalik Rao, leader of Nanded, that is Nizam state, went to see him with some friends. While they were taking with him, the names of Shirdi and Sai Baba were casually mentioned. Hearing Baba's name, the Swami joined hands with reverence and taking a coconut gave it to Pundalik Rao and said to him, "Offer this to my brother Sai with my pranam and request him not to forget me, but ever love me." He also added that Swamis do not generally bow to others, but in this case an exception had to be made. Mr. Pundalik Rao consented to take the coconut and his message to Baba. The Swami was right in calling Baba a brother, for as he maintained an Agnihotri, that is sacred fire, day and night in his orthodox fashion, Baba too kept his Agnihotri, that is Dhuni, ever burning in the masjid. After 1 month, Pundalik Rao and others left for Shirdi with the coconut and reached Manmad, and as they felt thirsty, they went to a rivulet for drinking water. As water should not be drunk on an empty stomach, they took out some refreshment, that is chivda, flattened rice mixed with spice. The chivda tasted most pungent, and in order to soften it, as someone suggested, broke the coconut and mixed its scrapings with it. Thus, they made the chivda more tasty and palatable. Unfortunately, the coconut turned out to be the same that was entrusted to Pundalik Rao. As they neared Shirdi, Pundalik Rao remembered the trust, that is the coconut, and was very sorry to learn that it was broken and consumed. He came to Shirdi and saw Baba. Baba had already received a wireless message regarding the coconut from Tembe Swami and himself asked Pundalik Rao first to give the thing sent by his brother. He held fast Baba's feet, confessed his guilt and negligence, repented and asked for Baba's pardon. He offered to give another fruit as a substitute, but Baba refused to accept it, saying that the worth of that coconut was far more than that of an ordinary one, and that it could not be replaced by another. Baba also added, "Now you need not to worry yourself and more about the matter. It was on coconut of my wish that the coconut was entrusted to you and ultimately broken on the way. Why should you take the responsibility of the actions on you? Do not entertain the sense of doership in doing good, as well as for bad deeds. Be entirely prideless and egoless in all things, and thus your spiritual progress will be rapid." What a beautiful spiritual instruction Baba gave. And now let's move towards the next story, that is the last story of this chapter. Balram Dhurandhar. Mr. Balram Dhurandhar belonged to the Pathare Prabhu community of Santa Cruz, that is Mumbai. He was an advocate of the Mumbai High Court and sometime principal of the Government Law School, Mumbai. The whole Dhurandhar family was pious and religious. Mr. Balram served his community and wrote and published an account of it, and then turned his attention to spiritual and religious matters. He studied Gita carefully and its commentary Jnaneshwari and other philosophical and metaphysical works. He was a devotee of Vithoba of Pandharpur. He came in contact with Sai Baba in 1912. 6 months earlier, his brothers Babulji and Vaman Rao came to Shirdi and took Baba's darshan. They returned home and mentioned their sweet experiences to Balram and other members. Then they all decided to see Sai Baba. Before they came to Shirdi, Baba declared openly that today many of my Darbar people are coming. The Dhurandhar brothers was astonished to hear this remark of Baba from others, as they had not given any previous intimation of their trip. All other people prostrated themselves before Baba and sat talking with him. Baba said to them, "There are my Darbar people whom I referred to before." And said to Dhurandhar brothers, "We have been with each other for the last 60 generations." All the brothers were gentle and modest. They stood with joined hands looking at Baba's feet. All the sattvic emotions such as tears, choking, etc. moved them, and they were all happy. Then they went to their lodging, took their meals, and after taking a little rest again came back to masjid. Balram sat near Baba massaging his legs. Baba, who was smoking the chilim, advanced it towards him and beckoned him to smoke it. Balram was not accustomed to smoking. Still he accepted the pipe, smoked it with great difficulty, and returned it reverentially. This was the most auspicious moment for Balram. He was suffering from asthma for 60 years. This smoke completely cured him of the disease which never troubled him again. Some 60 years later, on a particular day, he again got an attack of asthma. This was precisely the time when Baba took his Mahasamadhi. The day of this visit was a Thursday, and the Dhurandhar brothers had the good fortune of witnessing the Chowdi procession that night. At the Aarti function in the Chowdi, Balram saw the glow of Panduranga on Baba's face, and next morning at the Kakad Aarti time, the same phenomenon. The same lustre of the beloved deity. Pandurang was visible again on Baba's face. Mr. Balram Dhurandhar wrote in Marathi the life of the Maharashtra Saint Tukaram, but he did not survive to see its publication. It was published later on by his brother in 1928. In short note on Balram's life given in the beginning of that book, the above account of Balram's visit has been fully corroborated. And by this way we are done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. And now, at last of this book, here is the epilogue. Let's see. We have done with chapter 51, and now we come to the last chapter, that is number 52 in the original. In this, Hemadpant gave his concluding remarks and promised to give an index, giving the contents of all the chapters in verse as is given in Marathi Sacred Book, but unfortunately that index was not found in Hemadpant's paper. It was therefore composed and supplied by an able and worthy devotee of Sai Baba, Mr. B.V. Dev, that is retired Mamlatdar of Thana. As we give in English books an index in the beginning and context of each chapter at its tops, we need not consider the last chapter as index here, and so we consider this chapter as the epilogue. Unfortunately, Hemadpant did not survive to revise the manuscript of this chapter and make it ready for the press. When it was sent to the press, Mr. Dev found it to be incomplete and unintelligible in certain places, but it had to be published as it was found. The main topics still therein are briefly given below. That is, greatness of Sadguru Sai. We prostrate ourselves before and take refuge in that Sai Samartha who besets all animate and inanimate things in the universe, who pervades all creatures equally without any differentiation, to whom all devotees are alike, and who knows not honor or dishonor, like or dislike. If we remembered him and surrender to him, he fulfills all our wishes and makes us attain the goal of life. This ocean of mundane existence is very hard to cross. Waves of attachment beat high against the bank of bad thoughts and break down trees of fortitude. The breeze of egoism blows with force and makes the ocean rough and agitated. Crocodiles in the form of anger and hatred move there fearlessly. Eddies in the form of the idea I and mine and their doubts whirl there incessantly, and innumerable fishes in the form of censure, hate, and jealousy play there. Though this ocean is so fierce and terrible, Sadguru Sai is its Agasti, that is, destroyer, and the devotees of the Sai have the least fear of it. Our Sadguru is the boat which will safely take us across this ocean. And here is the prayer. Let's do. Now, we fall before Sai Baba and holding his feet makes the following prayer for the public. Let not our mind wander and desire anything except Thee. Let this work, that is Satacharitra, be in every house and let it be studied daily. Let it ward off all calamities of those who study it regularly with reverence. And now we are done with all the chapters. Here is the Falashruti, that is reward of this study. If you have listened this Satacharitra with devotion and love, here are the rewards you will achieve. So let's see. Now a few words about the reward you get from this work. After bathing in the sacred Godavari and after taking the darshan of the Samadhi in the Samadhi Mandir at Shirdi, you should read or hear the Satacharitra. If you do this, all your threefold afflictions will vanish. Casually thinking about the stories of Sai, you will get interested in spiritual life. And if you go through it with love and reverence, all your sins will be destroyed. If you wish to get rid of the cycle of births and deaths, read Sai stories and remember him always, and get yourself devoted to his feet. If you dip into the sea of Sai's story and then give them out to others, you will get an ever new flavor of them and save the hearers from future misery. If you go on meditating on Sai's form, it will, in course of time, lead you into self-realization. It is very hard to know or realize the nature of self of Brahma, but if you approach through the Sagun Brahma, that is Sai's form, your progress will be easy. If the devotee completely surrenders himself to him, he will lose his individual ego and be merged in him and be one with him as the river becomes one with the sea. If you thus become merged with him in any of the three states, that is waking, dream and sleep, you get rid of the bond of sansar. If anybody after bathing reads this with love and faith and completes it within a week, his calamities will disappear. Or if he hears or read it daily and regularly, all his dangers will be warded off. He will get the reward according to his faith and devotion. Without this, there will be no experience of any kind. If you read this with reverence, Sai will be pleased, and by removing your ignorance and poverty, will give you knowledge, wealth and prosperity. With concentrated mind, if you read a chapter daily, it will give you unbounded happiness. One who has his own welfare at heart should study it carefully, and then he will ever remember Sai gratefully and joyfully birth after birth. This work should be read at home, specially on Guru Purnima, Gokul Ashtami, Ramanavami and Dasara, that is Baba's Punya Tithi. If you study this one book carefully, all your desires will be satisfied, and if you always remember Sai's feet in your heart, you will easily cross the bhava, that is worldly illusion, that is sagar. By its study, the disease and sick will get health, the poor wealth, the mean and afflicted the prosperity, and the mind will get rid of all futile ideas and get steadiness. Dear devoted readers and listeners, we also bow to you all and make you a special request: never forget him, whose stories you have read day by day or month by month. The more fervently you read or listen to these stories, the more encouragement Sai gives us to serve you and be of use to you. Both the author and the readers must cooperate in this work, help each other, and be happy. And now, here is the Prasad Yachana. We close this with prayer to the Almighty for the following Prasad of favor. May the readers and devotees have complete and wholehearted surrender and devotion at Sai's feet. May his form be ever fixed in their eyes, and may they see Sai, the Lord, in all beings. Amen. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. And now next we are going to perform Aarti 2 of Sai Baba.
Aarti Sai Baba, Saukya Datar Jiva, Charan Rajatali, Dava Dasa Visava, Bhakta Visava. Aarti Sai Baba, स्वस्वरूपी राहे दंड मुमुक्षु जना दावी निज डोळा श्रीरंग आरती साई बाबा जया मनी जैसा भाव तया तैसा अनुभव दावी सी दया घना ऐसी तुझी ही माव आरती साई बाबा तुमचे नाम ध्याता हरे संस्कृती व्यथा अगाध तव करणी मार्ग दाविसी अनाथा साई बाबा कलियुगी अवतार सगुण ब्रह्म साकार अवतीर्ण झालासे स्वामी दत्त दिगंबर आरती साई बाबा आठा दिवसा गुरुवारी भक्त करी तिवारी प्रभु पद पाहवया भव भय निवारी आरती साई बाबा माझा निज द्रव्य ठेवा तव चरण रज सेवा मागणे हेची आता तुम्हा देवादिदेवा आरती साई बाबा इच्छित दिन चातक निर्मल तोय निज